Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining today. Today we have a very, very special interview. Have you ever been in a situation with something that is very important to you, and you perceive that that is taken away from you, and there's nothing else you can do? Can you imagine what is happening in your heart and your mind? I don't know. Let's see what this guest has to say today. Jeff Hittner, about over a decade ago, he discovered that he was not going to be able to have biological kids. But he did not stop at that. He did whatever he had to do to be able to become a father. Welcome, Jeff. How are you today?
Well, I'm great. Thank you for having me. And yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Yeah, where should we begin?
I want to ask, the first question I want to ask, who is Jeff Hittner?
Well, he's a dad. I think that's what I would say my first identity is. And then after that, I would say my purpose in life is really to help people transform and grow, and I do that with adults, and I most definitely do it with my kids and with other young people, and it's because I'm a leadership expert and an executive coach, so I most definitely do it for a living. But about 2.5 years ago now, I founded something called Ambitious Dads. So I have interviewed over 200 dads to try to understand a lot of the challenges that we're going through in modern fatherhood. There's just so much change in how we want to be seen and want to interact and be involved in the lives of our children, while also still being focused on having careers. And there's just not a lot of support. There's not a lot of conversation around it. There's not a lot of diving into the vulnerable aspects of what it means to honestly feel like you're not great at anything at the same time, especially when you're trying to be great at work and great at home. And so I've launched a podcast called the Ambitious Dads Podcast. I have a website, ambitiousdads.com, where I work with fathers all over the globe who want to be more intentional in their fatherhood, who want to understand how they can try to be great both at work and with their families. And that's what I do.
I absolutely love that name, Ambitions Dad. It's, there is I perceive at times a limitation on how we think that all the things that a man can do. And what inspired you to create this, which I love?
So, I mean, the inspiration goes back to kind of how you launched the episode. So, over a decade, probably 12 years ago now, the one thing that I wanted and imagined more than anything else in my life, for my whole life, even as far back as high school, I always knew I wanted to be a dad, and I found out that I couldn't be a biological dad. And I realized if I didn't want my story to end there, my fatherhood journey, then I needed to change my definition around something as foundational as what fatherhood meant. And I was able to, and that's why I have two boys. They are 5 and 8, and they're the absolute lights of my life. And I recognize that if I was able to change my mindset about something as foundational as the definition of father and fatherhood, then we can all change our mindsets around absolutely anything. And that really propelled me into the work that I do as an executive coach and a leadership expert. But then, more importantly, into the work I'm doing with other fathers. And for sure, there's a bit of it that comes from like my own identity issues around fatherhood, right? So I am super focused on the nurture side of fatherhood because I can never have the nature side of fatherhood. And with that, I also recognize that I don't have anywhere close to the answers. In fact, I'm filled with a lot of unknowns, and that's why I started interviewing other dads. Yeah.
There is some, I would like you, please, to take me to back when you discovered that you were not going to be able to have biological kids. I want you to really, you can take as much time as you want, or briefly describe what was the emotional state in your mind. What did you create out of that? And of course, you changed the way you were thinking, but at that time, and the reason why I ask you this is because I have a good idea that there are more individuals, and right now listening to this episode and wanting to have kids and perhaps in the same situation. So can we just go to that? What was happening in your mind? What was being challenged as men, as father, as men? That's primarily the question.
I mean, I guess I could answer it a bunch of different ways, but specifically in terms of like as a man and masculinity, it really didn't hit me from that perspective. It hit me more from a perspective of like, who am I if I was born without the possibility to reproduce? Like, where's the meaning in that? And, like, does God hate me? Does like, is there something so imperfect about me that I shouldn't be a dad? So I wrestled with very existential questions. And what was really fascinating was that my wife was wrestling with other things. I mean, she just wanted to know how we could get to family, how we could have a family.
Excellent.
So she was ready to solution. And I was, when first kind of got the final diagnosis, and I needed to grieve. And one of the most interesting things I also learned through couples therapy, which is so valuable through any crisis, but also just in general for maintaining a healthy relationship, was that it was okay, even though this was our journey together, it was okay to be feeling different things and needing different things. So we actually sort of split up our, instead of going to therapy with our couples therapist together, we went separately for several months, because what she needed to kind of grieve and move forward was very different than what I needed. And being given that permission to not need to lean on my wife, but actually lean, for instance, on my guy friends who could have a different perspective and maybe empathize in a very different way, was super powerful just to have that permission. And then obviously eventually get to that place where beyond the grief, we could move to, okay, now what are we going to do?
Action plan.
So it was a really, it was a challenging journey, but we made it happen a lot quicker than a lot of the other men who I sought out who had been through a similar experience went through. I wasn't going to take 2 or 3 years to get to the other side, because I never doubted that I was going to be a dad. What I needed to get through was the why questions, and that's what took up a lot of my energy at the front.
For a man who's struggling with this, who has a partner, a woman in their life, from a man perspective, for those women who are listening right now, and you said it very wisely, each one had a different journey and different concern and different struggle. But what words would you tell those women to be able to understand or support? Because at that time, I guess there's a challenge for them, but not just if they have the desire to support their men. What would be the wisdom that you might want to share with them at this right now?
I mean, at the beginning stages, it's understanding that we're going to sort of need different things at the beginning. I think while everyone's process of grief and transformation is different, I think often, particularly when the the cause of the challenge is not us, our inclination is then to move to the solution. Okay, I get it, and actually, I can get over this quickly. I'm thinking, I'm trying to talk as if I'm the wife, the partner, and I want to talk about like what we can do to move forward. When what's really needed is to sit in that grief for the man for an extended period of time until they're ready. And by the way, there are periods of grief that are too long, and there are periods of grief that are too short. I can't say, as I'm not a therapist, I can't say what is what, but I definitely met men who, are sitting in that grief for 2 or 3 years, which I feel is not progress and is not movement. And then if you get through that grief in a month or two, I also think that might be a bit quick to not necessarily have asked all these questions that are at some point going to bubble up in your conscious and subconscious. So it's really about recognizing that where you are as the wife, as the partner, is almost definitely not going to be the same place that your husband or partner is going to be at in the first several months of really absorbing this news.
If we start talking about high performing men, you help a lot of CEOs who look excellent on paper, but how do we know what really are the struggles that they have, even when everything looks good?
How do we know? I mean, I'm not quite sure. That I would say that the pitfall that we are often in is evaluating someone's happiness or success by some very superficial external cultural definition of both. So he's doing well at work. He's got this large family or whatever. He's got this big house, and therefore assuming that that they feel very happy and purposeful. Mm-hmm. When the men that I coach, and I coach a lot of CEOs, a lot of executives, we never start with just like, what's going on? What's your vision for work? It's like, what's your vision for your family? What's your vision as a father? What's your vision for your career, for sure? And a whole host of other things, your health, your self-care. I think as any of us know in our own lives, if we reflect for a moment and think about what makes us feel whole, it is not one thing. We include lots of different pieces to feel like we are living a fulfilled life. And so to judge or to guess, even if we're not judging, as to someone else's success or happiness because of 1 or 2 data points that are pretty superficial, is to really be misaligned with what's going on inside most men and most people.
I love what you just said. I love that. I was saying yesterday, there's a difference between happiness and fulfillment. And fulfillment is what we want to look for. But, and you're right, some of those individuals might inspire or exemplify, or other individuals might look to be like that individual that might look good on paper, when in reality, what it matters really is to having a fulfilling life. You're absolutely right. You talk about clarity, connection, and calm. And I'm just curious how a Tuesday night looks like at your house.
What does it look like? It really depends on the week. So, if I have calls, so our kids get home around 5. If I like to cook, but my wife likes to cook. I like to play with the boys. She likes to play with we have different strengths too. So any Tuesday can be different, but I would say generally, I'm going to try to be present and engage with my boys in at least one activity for, 20 or 30 minutes. I might have a call. and they might be doing some homework. Maybe I cook dinner. They'll want to engage more, and I always invite them in. They're often cooking with me. We'll cook together. We'll all sit down and eat. But there's still a lot more hecticness in it. There's a lot more trading off. One week my wife might be doing more work, another week I might. One Tuesday she might cook, another Tuesday I might cook. Bedtime's always the same though. We're both taking care of the kids and putting them to bed together. They like to fall asleep with us, which is great. I still love that, and I recognize that day may come any day now when they say, "Daddy, I don't need you to put me to sleep anymore." There's a lot of that, but one of the things I want to highlight in there is there's not an expectation that I have to be present from the moment they get home till the moment they go to bed. For me, I give myself the responsibility of not being distracted and being with them for a chunk of time, but not the whole night. I want them to find their own way too. I want them to be bored a little. I want them to be playing with their toys. I want them to be doing a bunch of stuff. And then I want them to interact in my life. So that's why they'll come in and they'll ask, can I help make dinner? And the answer is always yes. And does it slow things down? Always yes. But this is all good stuff. And then we have some rituals around dinner, around saying gratitudes, around no toys, no phones at the table, that sort of thing. Yeah.
How old are you boys now?
5 and 8.
Wow, what a perfect age.
Yeah.
Curiosity. I love curiosity. You mentioned earlier when you found out about this, when you were taking couples therapy, and you decided, or you thought it was healthy just to, split and each one taking a journey on their own. You mentioned something about you will be able to have conversations with your friends, male friends, that perhaps will be for you more fulfilling than just going to the couples therapy. So do you perceive that it's necessary for a man to have a community or a support system from other men in order to be able to express and have these conversations?
I believe that every human being on this earth is better off having a community of friends, both male and female. But if you're male, yeah, ideally more men, and if you're female, probably more female, because of the empathy factor of just being of the same sex. But 100% it is essential to what makes us human, which is connection and honestly, vulnerability is part of connection. So sharing things that you're anxious about and not solving all of them. I think this is a cultural thing, not a human thing, that we feel the need as men to listen to someone else's problem and then try to create a solution for it. There isn't, for instance, a solution to how hard it is to balance work and being a parent. There is only listening, right? There's thank God you said that this is hard for you, because it's also incredibly hard for me. And that actually is part of what makes it more bearable, to realize that all these things we're going through, we're not going through alone. Yeah.
So you are a coach, but you perceive that you are not a coach. You will have the same amount of individuals asking you for an advice or communicating with you?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Can you say it a different way?
You have, your trade is being a coach, so you have some wisdom. You guide individuals. If that was not your career, being a coach, you were just a dad with a different profession, do you perceive that individuals coming to you asking you for wisdom will be the same amount?
Oh, interesting. I don't know. I think I long for community around the things that are often in my head, which tend to be philosophical, but also sort of profound from a fatherhood perspective. And I imagine I would probably try to seek that community out in another way if I wasn't a coach. I mean, if there was no ambitious dads before I started it, and I must say that was I started it very selfishly. It wasn't necessarily like, how can I bring all these men together? It was more like, I think I'm not doing great as a dad, and I really kind of want to know if other dads are struggling. One of my favorite examples was, so I have two boys, as we've said, and they fight all the time. And I was like, what is wrong with me as a parent? Like, they just always are fighting. And I started having some of these conversations when I was doing these interviews, and when I would talk to a dad that was either a sibling to another guy or had two boys or three boys even, I would ask, like, do your kids fight or did you fight with your brother? And they would be like, oh my God, all the time. And we love each other. And it was just like hearing that. That was the type of stuff that made me feel better about myself, and also like helped me parent in a different way because it was normalized, different things. And so all of this is to say that in part, I probably would be seeking out some of these conversations one way or another.
I am so grateful that you said that, because the next question is going to be, for those individuals who don't perceive they have that support system and they perceive they're failing as father, because they don't have more information, they can't compare notes, they don't have that space to feel vulnerable. What would you tell them?
Well, one, I would say we are all imperfect as fathers. And like finding community and finding ways to grow and not feel shame in that imperfection is really like kind of core to enjoying the ride of fatherhood more. The challenge is, how do you do that? I'm building community. You can listen to my Ambitious Dads podcast or go to ambitiousdads.com, where I've run programs for dads. But in your own communities, it's often about like, can you find a dad mentor, like someone who's maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead or more in their fatherhood journey, and be willing to open up with them, meet up and have the types of conversations that get beyond the superficial.
What do you perceive sometimes men struggle a little more with sharing than women, for instance? They, it's like, what are your perception on that?
Well, I think as a generalization, that's true. I work with and have unbelievable guy friends, and they are, in fact, in many ways more vulnerable in my experiences than the women that I know. But generally, culturally, it wasn't something that we as adult men today were raised with. So those of us that are vulnerable today and recognize the strength in vulnerability, that it creates deeper connection, that in front of our kids, in fact, creates a greater sense of love and learning, which is so critical in a world that's always changing. We have to make it feel like our family is always trying to grow because we want our kids to be lifelong learners. I think it's absolutely true that if we're adults and weren't brought up with this like experience of being vulnerable, that it's something that takes more effort and we have to learn, and that's okay. It's okay to have to learn that. But when you feel that like sadness or ache in your chest or like frustration, or notice that you can't emotionally regulate as a man, as a father, and you accept that over like seeking help and being vulnerable and having the conversations, then it is on you, right? Like you weren't raised with it, but like, you know that you don't want to be this way, then it's time to figure out how to make that change. And there are options out there.
I perceive that what you said is, yes, sometimes we are given choices that we don't make, But at one point, we had to take responsibility for, changing that, which brings me to my next question. Changing or transforming your mindset. You said that you transform your mindset. Can you take me a little bit about on that and what exactly you did and what was the before and after?
So I'll tell you actually what popped into my head first. What I did was I first sought out other people in my situation, other men in my situation. And that was a lot harder than it should have been. It was really hard to find those men. But in doing that, almost always they were further ahead in the journey, which is so critical to the transformation, to seeing that, like, look, I'm not there right now. Like, I'm still in mourning. I'm still in this grief stage, but I see that these other men have gotten to that next step, and they've started their family, or they're further along, and they're considering their options. And so I know that it's possible, and that's part of like what's really necessary. Transformation is about living your future self now. So it's about all the different ways that you can like have this cognitive dissonance of seeing like part of me isn't ready for this, or part of me doesn't believe this, but another part of me is seeing someone else do it, and I know if he can do it, I don't know that guy well, but I know I can do it if he can do it. And also just like putting yourself in that mindset, like, this is me. It may not be me today, but it is me. And that helps move the needle. That's part of the transformation.
The CEOs or men in leadership quite often struggle to find a balance between being a father, being a husband, and being a leader at work. What would you tell these men? How can a man find a balance and try to do his best as a father without, sacrificing that?
Well, there really is no balance. There's no perfect balance. There's sort of ebbs and flows for all of these things. And recognizing that first, just like with moms know that there's no perfect balance. What they're great at, that men need to learn to get better at, is they have more community and can get together and talk about how like difficult it is to try to feel like they're giving 100% at work, and they're giving 100% at home, and taking care of themselves too, not just their kids. For dads, it's the same thing. But the starting point might be a little differently. The way I work with dads is like, you already know how to build a vision and a strategy and a strategic plan at work. Why don't you put that sort of intentionality into how you think about your family and how you want to father? So with the men that I work with in particular, we focus on creating what I call a fatherhood philosophy. And we work on that. And it's an extension of how we think about like our careers, but it's applied at home as well.
Would you like to have daughters?
I would love to. It was just pure like randomness. And in fact, we decided we wanted to be surprised when our second one was born. So we didn't know if we were going to have a boy or a girl. And it was funny because we actually thought for sure it was going to be a girl, and we had a girl's name and everything. And we had like sort of a guy's name. And then first of all, hindsight is 2020, but then our son was born during the worst of the lockdown and early COVID. And the last thing we needed was a surprise about what if we were having a boy or a girl. But we did anyway. And and it was a surprise anyway. And it was a boy, and we looked at him and we were like, oh my God, this name is not going to work. I don't know how you know that. You just look at that face and you're like, nope. And so it took a couple of days to come up with a name. So that's how unprepared we were. How sure we were going to have a girl, but we did not.
How fun. Well, who knows, right? The race is not over. So When you interviewed all those I believe you said 200 men, what were the realizations for you of those myths that people believe that are not true with regards to men mind?
Yeah, one of the big, I mean, I think I mentioned one of them, this work-life balance. There is no balance. There's just ebbs and flows and trade-offs. But I think another one that far too many dads, and I would imagine moms too, have is that like being a good mom or being a good dad is something that just comes naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And like if it's not coming naturally, then like you're just not a good dad or you're not a good mom. And like that couldn't be further from the truth. Our children, especially in the 21st century, there is so much knowledge and learning required to parent, and it is constant and it changes, every 12 months because they're changing. They're moving into like, their next sort of growth stage and development stage. And those are a couple of huge, huge myths that I think a lot of dads have. And the other that I was actually talking to someone about recently is this myth. Like so many dads recognize that one of the core aspects of being a good father is being present,
Mm-hmm.
but they get overwhelmed in this idea. They think that being present means like I have to be present for 3 hours straight when they come home from school or when I'm with them. And that's not what a child needs to feel connection and to feel presence. And it's certainly not what most of us are capable of. And to like really break it down into like, okay, I'm going to just be present, like phone in the other room, no distractions. I'm going to get down at my son or daughter's level for 10 minutes. Like that's a great starting point. And then, after playing in their world, maybe they'll get involved in your world. Like that's what I do when they come and cook with me as opposed to me spending 3 hours engaged in their toys, that sort of thing. So I think those are some big areas.
You spoke earlier about a few things. You spoke about balance, how it's, gives and takes. You also spoke about fulfillment. You also spoke about and fulfillment. You talk about it's not. People are stuck sometimes where defining success or defining someone by specific things, which is not true because individually is who determine if he's successful or fulfill, I guess that's a better word, or not. In an individual who has higher value on the profession that is performing rather than being a dad at that time or other things, right? That if the highest value and he feels fulfill the most when he's solving problems for the individuals. That's usually what a profession does, solving problems one way or another. But they're beating themselves up because they want to be seen. We also talk about that. They're going to be seen as a perfect dad, but they feel like they falling behind. How would you, what advice would you give to those individuals?
I mean, a couple of different things come to mind. I think the first thing would be about like when I think about legacy, and there's a couple of ways to think about legacy. On the one hand, it's this sort of cliche. If you're writing your own eulogy 80 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
do you want it to say like you were a great corporate strategist and you were great with all this stuff at work, or do you want it to focus 80 or 90% on how you engaged with your family and friends? That's the first piece. The second aspect of legacy is what I call like being reactive versus being intentional. And so many of us feel like we're doing a pretty crappy job as dads because we feel very reactive. We're reacting to the situation. We're reacting to the tantrum. We're reacting to the challenge that our child is naturally facing as they're developing and growing. Being intentional means giving yourself some space, the way you design a strategy at work, to decide like, how do I want to show up as a dad this year? Like, what are the values I want to overtly bring in front of my children, and what are the ways I want to engage with them and develop with them. When we kind of shift from reactive to intentional, and also when we really think about this long-term legacy, I think that can have a really huge impact in our confidence as fathers.
Excellent. Um, in the world of executive coaching, what is the most common issue that you solve?
Around fatherhood or just in general?
Let's talk about fatherhood first, and then we go general.
I think, I mean, the number one complaint or issue that comes up by a long shot is around like balance, right? And because it doesn't have like there's no, okay, we're going to coach and therefore we're going to have a solution. It's really about, again, our mindset and thinking about how we like our trade-offs and priorities, and how we will set sort of boundaries and guardrails, and but also part of feeling better about our balance is, again, feeling more confident in our fatherhood when we can show up. And that comes with having a fatherhood philosophy and being intentional. So I'd say that's the biggest area for sure.
Excellent. And in general?
I mean, to be honest, in general, it's all over the place. So it depends on the sort of the situation of the leader or the executive, and sometimes it can be around how they empower their teams more rather than micromanage.
Mm-hmm.
Other times it can be, I'm drinking from a fire hose. How do I just really keep the right priorities in front of me? It can be a whole host of things.
As a community, what is the perception that is known that you think working with individuals is incorrect about fathers primarily?
Like the stereotypes?
Yeah, exactly.
One that both men and women have, if they haven't put like a ton of thought into it, is just like what the definition of fatherhood is, or like their responsibility. So we used to use this word like that the dads are the providers. And instead of changing that word, a lot of the fathers that I work with talk about, yes, but I don't want to just provide from a financial perspective. I actually want to be an emotional provider, right? I want to be a provider of growth and development for my child, just like a mom does. She wants to be, especially working moms, they want to play a role as a financial provider, but also an emotional provider. And so I think that's the biggest stereotype that we run into, is that there's still this singular definition of provider when it's a lot more nuanced. And I think the other is, there really is a stereotype that if I say no to growth at work, if I say no to a project or a task because it's going to interfere with some family like goals and activities that I really want to be engaged with, that I'm somehow going to burn my career to the ground. I have yet to meet an executive dad who doesn't regret some of the decisions they've made where they said yes to work and missed something at home, because they've all realized in hindsight they absolutely could have said no to that and nothing would have been lost. And I think there's a lot of assumptions around that is not possible, and I just don't think that's true.
So what would be the biggest regrets that men have as a father?
I think it depends on sort of the demographic of father that you ask. I mean, if you're asking people that are now grandparents, they're going to give you a very different answer than a Gen Z or a millennial or a Gen X that's a dad. But I think one thing that I would say that they all sort of have in common is this lack of confidence in their fatherhood. And it doesn't need to be that way. that lack of confidence comes mostly because they're not sharing enough. They're not sharing enough with other dads. They're not sharing like the ups and downs of what they're going through. So they just think they're alone in like the challenges. I'll give you a really fun example. I was running a program called the Founding Fathers Program, a 10-week program, sold out. There's 25 dads in it, and it was a 12-week program to build a fatherhood philosophy and really like become more intentional as a father. And maybe 3 or 4 weeks in, there's one dad, and he's like really distraught. His son was maybe 6 or 7 months old, and he's like, guys, last night, I was watching my son and he was sitting on the couch, and I turned to do something and he fell off the couch and he hit his head. And I am like the worst dad. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Guys, raise your hand if you have dropped your son or your child. And like 2/3 of the dads raised their hand. Like they had all dropped their baby at some point in some way. And it was that moment where he realized like he wasn't alone. He wasn't a bad dad. He just like that happens. I mean, it happens to moms. It happens to dads right at that age when they start to go from sitting there and doing nothing to crawling and moving around. There's always a little bit of a fall. And hearing that really changed things for him. And it's those types of examples. And so I think one of those, again, that big gap around confidence can really be quickly rectified with more conversation.
The struggle is real. I can see how important it is this thing that you're creating, this groups, this venue where they can learn more, and that's why they are ambitious dads, because they want to be more of that, more dad, and whatever the environment requires for their kids. How a man identify it to own his own individual values and not let society project what society want them to be.
Well, I mean, I have a process. I think there are lots of processes out there. But in part, again, this comes from reflection. It comes from kind of having a conversation also with your partner, if you have one, and really understanding like what are the values that drive you, and also are those necessarily the values that you want to drive your children. Oftentimes, there are people that are propelled like to be incredibly successful in work, but if you really ask them if they want that value instilled in their child, the answer isn't always yes. The same when it comes to money. Like you want them to be as driven financially as you. The answer is actually, I would like them to think of money very differently than I was raised thinking about money. So I really think like the process can be very personal and like just a reflection, or it can be very intentional through something that I do and that other sort of coaches and leaders do. There's no single way for sure.
Jeff, I would love for you to share moment that you have with any of your boys or both of them that got you very inspired, that got maybe some tears at that moment, that you realized that it was all worth it, all the the chaos sometimes of fatherhood, and just to live that moment.
There's so many, honestly, but the one that made me cry was, because we used a donor, the best practice is to talk to your children about like where they come from, to normalize it. And so whenever it comes up for whatever random reason, I lean into it. And we were having ice cream by the beach, in fact, and the topic came up and we were chatting about it. And I mentioned to my son that like it was required by this rule that they have contact with their donor when they turn 18. And he said, well, why would it be a rule? Is it because they think like that you're like that you're not a good dad or something? And I hadn't ever thought of like how to answer that for him, but he turned to me and just said, he answered his own question. He said, that would never ever be an issue with us because you are like the best dad ever. And so he just said it while talking about the donor, and it just made me cry. And I remember it was really funny because my 5-year-old, who, like, he's a little behind, so he's not quite getting the nuance in the conversation. He's just like, why is daddy crying? And it was great because it was like such a moment of connection with my oldest son. It was beautiful.
And I connected with that moment. I have tears right now. That's beautiful. I absolutely love. So are you ready for some rapid fire questions? I say one.
Oh,
Ooh,
okay.
spicy. All right. Transformation.
What am I supposed to do with the question?
Pardon me. I'm just gonna say one or two words and then answer whatever comes to your mind first. Cool?
Okay, yeah. All right. So the first word was transformation.
Transformation.
The absolute most necessary thing to living a fulfilling life.
I love it. Fulfillment.
Purpose is what comes to mind for me.
Excellent. Values.
Love is what comes to mind for me.
Intimacy.
Trust and vulnerability.
Mindset.
Malleable.
Leadership.
Everyone's responsibility.
Son.
Love.
Manhood.
Evolving.
Teams.
What's the first thing that comes to mind? Teams, I would say, I want to say like there's just so much more for us to do in this category to like really bring out the best of people.
Reaction.
Something we need to work on. Like I always find reaction isn't necessarily where we want the focus to be. It's like the thoughtfulness that comes after the initial reaction.
Excellent. Change.
Every day.
Breakthrough.
Celebration. Like whenever we have breakthroughs, we need to really sit with it and enjoy it.
Family.
Why I do this.
AI.
I'm scared and excited, but really scared.
Sex.
Complex and instinctual.
I love that. Social media.
I don't have much great things to say about it. That's as a dad. Yeah, it scares me.
Social influence.
Social influence. My kids aren't there yet. So as a dad, I'm thinking about this answer, but I think this goes back to responsibility. Like we will all influence people, so we need to be aware of it.
Community.
It's what keeps me going.
Brotherhood.
Something we need more of.
Fear.
Something we all have and should have the courage to talk about.
Conversation.
Something we're doing right now and I want to do more of.
Money.
A stickler for too many relationships.
Presence.
A really simple, beautiful way to find connection.
Donor.
Part of my journey.
Balance.
The impossible goal.
Men.
On a beautiful journey.
This has been very inspiring, Jeff. I was really looking forward to having this conversation with you, and I hope we have more of this. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for bringing your heart. Thank you for bringing your kids. And what are your kids' names, by the way?
Riv and Remy.
Well, Riv and Remy are extraordinarily lucky to have you as their dad. And thank you for being here. And I would love for you to share something or give your wisdom to close this episode. So the mic is yours.
I would just say that no matter what is on our mind and consuming sort of our mental energy, it always serves you well to share it with someone.
Thank you. I love that. Well, again, thank you. And for those of you who are listening to this episode, I want to invite you, please, to share your stories at intimateconversationswithmen@gmail.com. And I would love to have 3 generations of men in this episode. So, Jeff, if your dad is alive or your grandfather or something, and once your kids are older, you're also welcome to come back. And I will love to see you again here talking more about maybe the teenage years, or I don't know. It's going to be interesting. You have an amazing journey. You know, I forgot to ask you a question. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger sister.
Oh, that's why you don't know what it is to have the 2 boys. I was wondering that. It's definitely different. All right. Yep. Well, thank you again, and good luck with your beautiful project. I'm very inspired, and thank you for that those tears that you bring to my eyes and the moments with your kids.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.